I raised my siblings alone. Now, they refuse to invite me to their weddings. The wedding invitation never came. I kept checking my mailbox for weeks, convinced the postal service had made a mistake. Every day, I'd shuffle through bills and advertisements, searching for that cream-colored envelope with Emma's careful handwriting. When I finally called her, my youngest sister's voice turned cold in a way that made my chest tighten. Sarah, we talked about this, she said, and I could hear her fiance whispering something in the background. It's going to be a small ceremony, just close friends and, well, people who've been supportive of our relationship. People who've been supportive. The words echoed in my head long after she hung up. I stared at my phone, watching her name disappear from the screen, and felt something crack inside me that I hadn't felt since I was 19 years old, standing in our mother's hospital room as the machines flatlined. That was 15 years ago. 15 years since I became a mother to 3 grieving children while still being a child myself. 15 years since I dropped out of college, broke up with my fiance, and moved back into our childhood home to keep us together. And now, as I sat in that same house, the one I'd never left because leaving meant abandoning them, I wondered if any of it had mattered at all. The thing about raising your siblings is that nobody prepares you for the resentment. Not theirs, yours. When you're 19 and your friends are studying abroad or backpacking through Europe and you're helping with algebra homework and packing school lunches, a small selfish part of you begins to rot. I pushed that feeling down for years, buried it under responsibility and love and the fierce determination to give them the stability our parents' deaths had stolen. Emma was only 8 when Mom died. Car accident on a rainy Tuesday morning, the kind of mundane tragedy that reorders entire universes in the space of a heartbeat. Our father had passed 2 years earlier from cancer, leaving Mom to juggle 3 kids alone until she couldn't anymore. When the social worker started talking about foster care and splitting us up, I made a decision that felt heroic at the time. I can take care of them. I'd insisted showing them my college transcripts and my part-time job at the campus bookstore as evidence of my maturity. I'm their sister. We're family. The judge was skeptical, but our Aunt Helen, Mom's sister, who lived 3 states away and visited twice a year, vouched for me. The state agreed to a trial period with regular check-ins, and suddenly I was legal guardian to Michael 13 and angry at the world, and Emma 8, and still asking when Mommy was coming home. Those first few years were a blur of parent-teacher conferences and grocery shopping with food stamps, of learning to braid hair from YouTube videos, and figuring out how to talk to a teenage boy whose grief manifested as rage. I worked 3 jobs: the bookstore during the day, waitressing at night, and cleaning offices on weekends. Michael helped when he could, but he was dealing with his own trauma, acting out at school, and getting into fights that resulted in endless meetings with counselors and principals. I became the disciplinarian, the comforter, the homework supervisor, and the breadwinner all at once. I attended Emma's school plays in my work uniform, cheered at Michael's baseball games on 3 hours of sleep, and tried to be both sister and mother to children who needed more than I knew how to give. Ow. But we survived. More than survived. We created something beautiful from the wreckage. Michael graduated high school and got a scholarship to study engineering. Emma excelled in everything she touched, becoming student body president and earning early admission to several prestigious universities. I was so proud I cried at their graduations, remembering all the nights I'd stayed up helping with projects or worrying about their futures. The distance started small. Michael went away to college and came back different, full of new ideas and friends who came from families with summer houses and trust funds. He'd bring them home occasionally, and I'd catch them looking around our modest house with barely concealed pity. Michael would introduce me as his sister, never mentioning that I'd raised him, and something about that omission stung more than I cared to admit. Emma was different. She was effusive with gratitude, always thanking me for my sacrifices, which somehow felt worse than Michael's omissions. Her gratitude created a debt she seemed desperate to escape, and I watched her pull away inch by inch throughout high school. She chose a college across the country, claiming she needed space to find herself, and her visits home became shorter and less frequent. After graduation, Michael took a job in Seattle, and Emma settled in Portland. They both invited me to visit, but something always came up: work obligations, apartment issues, their need to establish themselves first. Our phone calls became monthly, then sporadic. Our family group chat devolved into holiday greetings and shared memes. I told myself this was normal, healthy even. They were launching into their adult lives, and my job as their guardian was complete. I should have been proud that they were independent and successful. And I was proud, but I was also lost. At 34, I had no idea how to be anything other than their caretaker. I'd never traveled, never lived alone, never had the chance to figure out who Sarah was when she wasn't responsible for everyone else. My friends from college were married with children of their own, established in the careers I'd never had the chance to pursue. I worked as an office manager, now steady, reliable work that let me help the kids through school, but never offered much room for growth. The loneliness was crushing, but I convinced myself it was temporary. Once they settled into adulthood, we'd find our new rhythm as adult siblings. We'd become friends, not just family bound by tragedy and necessity. Then Michael got engaged to Jennifer, a lawyer he'd met at work. She was lovely, polished, and professional, the kind of woman who wore expensive scarves and knew about wine. When they announced their engagement during a brief Christmas visit, I was genuinely happy for him. When's the wedding? I asked, already mentally planning time off work and trying to figure out what to wear to what would surely be an elegant affair. Michael and Jennifer exchanged a look I couldn't quite read. We're thinking small, Jennifer said carefully. Very intimate. Just immediate family and a few close friends. I nodded, assuming I was included in immediate family. I'd raised him for 8 years. I'd taught him to drive, helped him with college applications, and been the person he called when he broke his wrist junior year. If I wasn't immediate family, what was I? The invitation never came for that wedding either. When I called Michael about it, he sighed like I was being unreasonable. Sarah, it's complicated. Jennifer's family is, well, they're traditional. It would be awkward to explain our situation. You understand, right? You're my sister, but you're not really my parent. It confuses people. No, it confuses people. As if our entire life together could be dismissed as a social inconvenience. I hung up and cried for the first time in years. Not the quiet tears I'd shed at their graduations, but ugly, gasping sobs that seemed to come from some deep well of grief I'd been ignoring. I mourned not just the missed wedding, but the relationship I'd thought we had, the family I'd thought we'd built from the ashes of our parents' deaths. When Emma got engaged 6 months later, I didn't even ask about the wedding. I waited for the invitation that I knew wouldn't come, and when she called with the same careful explanation about keeping things small, I just said I understood, but I didn't understand. I didn't understand how the children I'd sacrificed everything for could look at me and see someone who didn't belong at the most important moments of their lives. I didn't understand how they could introduce me as my sister who helped out after our parents died, as if I'd occasionally babysat rather than given up my youth to raise them. The worst part was that I could see their perspective even as it broke my heart. To them, I represented obligation and trauma, the loss of their parents, and the weight of being raised by someone barely older than a child herself. I was a reminder of the worst time in their lives, not the person who'd helped them survive it. I'd done everything right according to the social workers and therapists. I'd kept us together, gotten them through school, helped them become successful adults. But in focusing so intently on their futures, I'd somehow lost my place in their presence. The realization hit me as I sat in my childhood bedroom looking at photos from Emma's high school graduation. In every picture, there was space between us, physical distance, that reflected the emotional gap I'd never noticed growing. They were grateful to me, but they weren't close to me. Gratitude isn't the same as love, and obligation isn't family. I'd spent 15 years being their guardian, their provider, their supporter, but I'd never learned how to just be their sister. That night, I made a decision that felt as terrifying as the one I'd made at 19. I wasn't going to chase them anymore. I wasn't going to beg for invitations or explanations. If they wanted a relationship with me, they would have to choose it freely, not out of duty or guilt. I started seeing a therapist, something I'd never had time or money for when they were younger. Dr. Martinez helped me understand that my resentment wasn't selfish, it was human. I'd been robbed of my young adulthood, and while my sacrifice had been necessary and loving, it was still a loss worth grieving. Slowly, I began to build a life that was mine alone. I took weekend trips to nearby cities, joined a hiking group, started dating a kind man named David, who didn't need to be managed or protected. For the first time in 15 years, I was learning who Sarah was when she wasn't defined by her role as caretaker. Michael called a few months after Emma's wedding, which I'd learned about through social media posts. His voice was different, smaller, somehow less certain, Sarah, I've been thinking about the wedding and everything. Jennifer and I watched the video, and there were all these people there who barely know us. And I kept thinking about how you weren't there. The person who actually raised me wasn't there. I stayed quiet, letting him work through whatever he needed to say. I messed up, he continued. We both did, Emma and me. We've been so focused on moving forward that we forgot. We forgot what you gave up for us. We forgot that you were just a kid, too. The apology was 15 years too late and exactly what I needed to hear. We talked for 2 hours. That night really talked for the first time since he'd left for college. He told me about his struggles with anxiety, how successful he looked on the outside, while feeling like an imposter who'd never learned how to process his parents' deaths. I told him about my loneliness, my resentment, and my love for him that had never wavered despite everything. Emma called the next week. Her conversation was harder, messier, full of false starts and tears. She'd been carrying guilt about my sacrifices that had poisoned her ability to be close to me. Every achievement felt like something she owed me rather than something she'd earned, and she'd needed distance to figure out who she was, separate from my care. I know I can't undo the weddings, she said through tears, but I want you in my life. Really in it, not just as someone I call on holidays because I'm supposed to. It wasn't a magical reconciliation. We had years of distance and misunderstanding to work through patterns of interaction to rebuild. But it was a beginning, and beginnings were something I'd become good at creating from nothing. Now, 2 years later, we text regularly and visit when we can. Michael and Jennifer had me over for Thanksgiving, and Emma brings her husband to visit every few months. We're learning to be adult siblings to see each other as whole people, rather than the roles trauma had forced us into. They still introduce me as their sister, but now they add, she raised us after our parents died. We wouldn't be who we are without her. It's a small change, but it acknowledges our history instead of minimizing it. I've learned that family isn't just about blood or obligation. It's about choice. And some days that choice is harder than others. But when Michael texts me photos of the house he and Jennifer are buying, asking for my opinion on the kitchen renovation, or when Emma calls just to talk about her day at work, I know they're choosing me, and I'm choosing them back. The weddings still hurt. They always will because they represented a moment when my sacrifices felt invisible, when my love felt unrecognized. But I've come to understand that healing doesn't require erasing the past. It requires building something new from the pieces that remain. I'm 36 now, no longer defined solely by what I gave up or what I lost. I'm proud of the children I helped raise, but I'm also proud of the woman I'm becoming. It took longer than it should have, but I'm finally learning that taking care of myself isn't selfish. It's necessary. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for the people you care about is to stop trying to be everything they need and start being who you are. The family we've built now isn't the one I imagined when I was 19 and desperate to keep us together. But it's real, and it's chosen, and it's ours. And that I've learned is enough.